Is this a musical composition? Or is it a cartographic survey? We operate under the terrestrial assumption that sound is ephemeral, a momentary vibration that dissipates into entropy the instant it is born. But the artifact currently levitating within the magnetic suspension field suggests a civilization that treated acoustics with the permanence of architecture. It is the only intact data storage unit recovered from the Amphitheater of Silence in Sector 9. Let us break the seal on the containment unit and document what remains. To the naked eye, the object appears deceptively familiar. It is a disk, 30 centimeters in diameter, possessing the lustrous, non-oxidizing sheen of high-purity gold. One might be forgiven for mistaking it for the Voyager golden record sent out by Earth in the late 20th century. However, as soon as we attempt to manipulate the object physically, the resemblance ends. The disk is dense. It possesses a specific gravity that defies its dimensions. Weighing nearly 4 kilograms, this mass suggests that the gold is merely a micron-thin plating, a protective cladding intended to prevent corrosion over eons. The core is composed of a hyperdense, superconductive alloy, likely a tungsten-osmium composite doped with exotic heavy metals. It is cold to the touch, acting as a thermal heat sink, rapidly drawing warmth from the air around it. This thermal conductivity is not a flaw, it is a feature of the storage mechanism. Reference Plate 1a, the macro surface analysis. Under standard optical magnification, the surface of the disk does not display the concentric, spiral grooves of a vinyl record. Instead, we see a chaotic, etched topography. It resembles a landscape of jagged peaks, deep canyons, and recursive fractal coastlines. This is not analog audio recording in the way we understand it. A traditional stylus vibrating in a groove interprets depth as volume and width as frequency. Here, the geometry is far more complex. The grooves are actually three-dimensional data canyons, etched with a precision that exceeds our current nanolithography capabilities. The depth of the cut does not correspond to amplitude, it corresponds to spatial coordinates. The width does not correspond to pitch, it corresponds to material density. We must infer that the playback mechanism, which was not recovered, did not merely play the sound. It likely scanned this topography with a coherent light source or a particle beam, translating the physical geography of the disk into a dense stream of sensory data. The context of the excavation adds a layer of dread to this engineering marvel. The disk was not found in a library or a home. It was found in the center of a vacuum-sealed, lead-lined anechoic chamber, buried 3 miles beneath the planet's crust. The room was designed not to keep sound out, but to keep sound in. When the excavation team breached the airlock, the atmosphere in the chamber was non-existent. The disk was resting on a pedestal of fused silica, perfectly preserved in the void. It is the black box of a culture that seemingly feared its own noise. I find the craftsmanship unsettlingly precise. There are no signs of tool marks, no microscopic burrs from a cutting lathe. The data was not carved, it was grown. The alloy shows signs of molecular alignment, suggesting the entire disk was printed atom by atom in a zero-gravity environment. Furthermore, the disk emits a faint, measurable field of static electricity. As I move my hand near the surface, without touching it, I can feel a texture in the air. A prickly resistance that maps the contours of the etching. It is a haptic phantom. The object wants to be read, even without the proper machine. It is broadcasting its topology into the electromagnetic spectrum. We are looking at a medium where the distinction between song and sculpture has been erased. This is not just a recording of a sound, it is a fossilized echo, captured in heavy metal, waiting for the right frequency to thaw it back into existence. Moving beyond the metallurgy, we confront the artifact's primary function, the transmission of information. However, to classify this object as a record is a linguistic failure. It implies a passive listening experience. The data contained within the golden record of Sector 9 is not passive, it is an act of neurological aggression. Because the original playback mechanism was lost to the same cataclysm that silenced the sector, we were forced to improvise. Our team utilized a variable spectrum laser interferometer to map the canyon-like topography of the disk's surface. We then fed this topographical data into a synthesis engine, translating the physical height and depth into sound waves. We expected music, perhaps speech. We received neither. The initial audio output was a chaotic wall of white noise, a screeching, multitonal static that registered across the entire range of human hearing. From sub-bass rumble to ultrasonic piercing. But as the translation algorithm refined the signal, synchronizing the phase alignment, the static vanished. It was replaced by a series of precise, rhythmic pulses. And then, the researchers in the room stopped taking notes. They stopped moving. Reference the medical logs for incident playback alpha. The 4 technicians present did not report hearing a sound. They reported a sudden, violent expansion of their local space. Despite sitting in a cramped, 3-meter-square laboratory, they perceived themselves to be standing in a vast, vaulted atrium. They could see the pillars rising into the darkness. They could feel the cold stone of the floor beneath their feet. We have identified this phenomenon as Psycho-Acoustic Echolocation. The audio encoded on the disc is not designed to be interpreted by the auditory cortex. It is a carrier wave, a complex mathematical instruction set designed to hack the listener's brain. It hijacks the auditory nerve and reroutes the signal directly to the visual cortex. Bypassing the eyes entirely, it utilizes the brain's dormant capacity for synesthesia, the crossing of sensory wires, to force the listener to construct a high-fidelity, 3-dimensional model of a physical space. The civilization of Sector 9 did not record music. They recorded architecture. This specific disc appears to be a blueprint, or perhaps a memorial, of their capital city. As the track progresses, the listener is propelled through the streets. I have subjected myself to a limited exposure, 30 seconds of the track, and the fidelity is terrifying. You do not just visualize the city, you inhabit it. I saw the fractal geometry of their towers, constructed from a glass that seemed to weep light. I saw the layout of their aqueducts. I saw the faces of the statues in their plazas. The detail is absolute. The audio frequency of 432 Hz translates to the color blue. The sharp, staccato clicks in the upper register translate to the texture of rough sandstone. The droning bass translates to the sensation of gravity itself. It is a symphony for the blind. A technology likely developed because the species that created it lived in a subterranean environment where light was scarce. Or perhaps because they had evolved beyond the need for optical vision. But I find the implications of this technology deeply intrusive. A painting hangs on a wall, you can choose to look away. A book sits on a shelf, you can choose to close it. This audio admits no refusal. Once the frequency enters the ear canal, the brain has no choice but to build the world it dictates. It is a colonization of the imagination. During the full-length playback test, Subject 7, an architect by trade, began to weep. He claimed he was trapped in a room with no doors. The record was describing a prison cell, and his mind was building the walls around him in real time. He could not see the laboratory exit because his visual cortex was being overridden by the audio data of the cell. He was physically free, but perceptually incarcerated. This reveals the true function of the golden record. It was not merely a storage device, it was a reality projector. In a society equipped with the proper biological or cybernetic receivers, this disc could transport a population to a new world without them ever leaving their homes. It allowed for the perfect transmission of experience. If a scout explored a new cavern, they could record the echolocation data, bring the disc home, and the entire tribe could walk that cavern as if they had been there. However, the precision required for such a transfer is lethal. Our analysis of the waveform shows that the audio contains data densities that push the human neuron to its firing limit. The brain heats up, the capillaries in the eyes burst. To listen to this city is to run a high-end graphics engine on a biological processor that was never designed for it. The headache that follows is not pain. It is the feeling of the mind trying to purge a memory that does not belong to it. We must also consider the silence between the tracks. In a normal recording, silence is the absence of sound. On this disc, silence is the absence of matter. When the audio cuts out, the listener perceives a void, an infinite, terrifying emptiness where the laws of physics dissolve. It suggests that for the people of Sector 9, existence itself was defined by sound. To be silent was to cease to exist. The destruction of Sector 9 was not caused by war, nor by a failure of their resources. It was caused by a failure of their engineering philosophy. They had built a civilization entirely dependent on acoustic harmony. Their cities were constructed from singing glass, a piezoelectric crystal that vibrated to maintain structural integrity. Their data was stored in sound. Their maps were songs. They had tuned their entire reality to a specific set of frequencies. But in acoustics, there is a phenomenon known as the Resonant Cascade. On the day of the collapse, the archaeological record suggests a global event, perhaps a celebration, or a synchronized broadcast intended to update the collective map of the capital. Every transmitter in the city, every golden record player, and every public amplification tower was activated simultaneously. They achieved perfect synchronization, and in doing so, they hit the resonant frequency of their own architecture. We see this on a small scale when an opera singer shatters a wine glass. The sound wave matches the natural vibration of the glass, adding energy to the system until the material can no longer hold its shape. Now, imagine that effect applied to a skyscraper. Imagine it applied to the foundation of a continent. The audio data recovered from the very end of the disc, the final bruise, records the sound of a civilization liquefying. The buildings did not crumble, they lost their molecular cohesion. The singing glass absorbed so much acoustic energy that it transitioned from a solid to a vibrating fluid. The citizens of Sector 9 did not flee. They could not. The floors beneath them turned to quicksand. The walls around them melted into viscous, sonic sludge. The magnificent towers, which had stood for millennia, simply slumped, pouring down into the streets like molten wax. The silence that followed was absolute. When the broadcast ended, the energy dissipated, and the glass rehardened instantly. The excavation site of Sector 9 is now a flat, smooth plain of vitrified crystal. There are no ruins. There are no bodies. Everything, the people, the art, the machines, is trapped inside the solid floor of the planet, fused together in a chaotic suspension. The amphitheater of silence is not an empty room, it is a tomb. This golden record survived only because it was made of metal, a material, deaf to the frequency that dissolved the rest of their world. It is the ultimate tragedy of a society that sought total connectivity. They wanted to share one song, one vision, one reality. They succeeded, and in that moment of perfect unity, they ceased to be individuals and became part of the geology. Wind down. I am powering down the laser interferometer. The topography of the disc fades from the monitors, returning to a dull, golden silence. This artifact is a reminder that beauty is often a question of tolerance. To the people of Sector 9, this record was a masterpiece of immersion. To us, it is a cognitively hazardous weapon. It sits on the shelf, a dormant heavy metal seed containing a city that no longer exists. We must leave it in the vacuum chamber. Some songs are not meant to be heard. Some memories are too heavy to be carried by the living.